Hi everyone, and welcome. Troy from Plot Geek Academy here, and today we're going to do a quick demo of the software Plottr. Now, many of you know that I used to be the education lead for Plottr, and I used to teach people about Plottr a lot. But this demo is going to be from a slightly different perspective, obviously from a customer and a user perspective, not necessarily from the education lead perspective. So, let's take a really good look at Plottr and see what it is, what it isn't. First of all, when you first open Plottr, you're going to see one of two things. Either you're going to see this dashboard, which in your case may be empty rather than full of all kinds of files like mine is from all the different things that I've taught while at Plottr, and all the different books that I've written myself using Plottr as an outlining tool. And that's one thing I want to make clear, is that I do use Plottr as an outlining tool still. Now, I use it in conjunction with some other programs, and we're going to talk about those as we get further into our demonstration. But here's some options. Okay, the options are to create a blank project, create from a template, open an existing file, or import a file. Now, you can import a file from Scrivener, or from Word, or from Snowflake Pro. Now, look for a video in the future because I'll talk to you about that import from Word and the import from Scrivener, because there are some tricky aspects to that. You've got to have things formatted a certain way for them to import into Plottr properly. Otherwise, they'll come in and they'll look messed up and you'll have to do a bunch of work to fix them, and we don't want you to have to do that. So we're going to skip over that right now, and we're going to talk about opening an existing file. So if you have an existing older Plottr file on your computer, you can actually open that as well. Now, just a word of caution here. If the file is on too old of a version of Plottr, like some of my old ones that I found recently, it won't open up right away. It'll ask you to upload that file to use it with Plottr or Plottr Pro, and you may have to, if it's a really old version, contact support and get their help in getting that file into your dashboard and into your current Plottr version. So do be aware of that. Now, create from template, we're going to explore it a little bit because we're going to talk about the plot templates that Plottr has and why that's one of the most useful features of the software. And then we're going to look at creating a blank project and what that looks like. And that's kind of where we're going to start today. Now, there's some other things over on the side. I'm not going to show you those in great detail because there are some personal information under the account, but just know you can find your account and the subscription that you have for Plottr or the way you purchase Plottr will be found in that account. You'll also find your backups. You can actually choose your backup location, but this will give you all the different dates and all the different backups that you may have had. You can also, under your account, change, and under the settings, which I'll show you in a minute, change where your backups live. I highly recommend that you put backups somewhere where you can access them, even if something were to happen to the cloud storage that is embedded in Plottr and that type of stuff. I just highly recommend redundant backups, and I'll actually talk to you about that as we go through the demo as well. Okay. In settings, you can do dark and light settings. I happen to like the dark settings better, but you can put it whichever way you want. I have it light because it's relatively easy for you to see in a YouTube video. Here you can select it to go with the system, whatever the system you're using with Mac, and you can choose your language. You can enable spell check. Okay, that's one thing you can do. You can set your fonts. So generally what I've done is just left these as default, but if you want different fonts, you can set them differently. You can set the timeline fonts, and you can set the default for the text editor as well, and the default size. Just understand that the way you zoom in with Plottr will impact how you see how the text looks in those text editors. Now the dashboard, you can always choose what you want to open first on Plottr. If you want the dashboard to open first, or if you want it open to your later project. You can also do the streaming friendly option. If I click this, then I can show you my account information without actually showing it to you, but I can't enable that right now because I'm in the middle of doing things. But you can enable that as well. This is where you can set your backups. You automatically save backups. Also save backups on this device as well as in the cloud. This is generally a good idea to have enabled as well, so that you can store those backups wherever you would like them to be. And then beta. Now, this is an offline mode that's been in beta for quite a while, and this is for those of you that have Plottr Pro. And what this does is enables you to work in offline mode, and then when you come back online, it's supposed to sync with everything that you do. Now, this offline mode, it is still in beta, and it doesn't work super well. So there are some issues with it that can cause some versioning issues and some issues with your files. So at the moment, I recommend that you not have that enabled. But if you do need help, you can turn to Plottr for help. You can contact support, create an error report, give feedback, whatever it is that you want to do. And the support is, generally speaking, very responsive. They have a pretty robust staff. They're pretty knowledgeable, and they respond fairly quickly. Okay, so those are the parts that you will see on your dashboard. Now, you can also look at the roadmap, so you can see what Plottr has planned. That's going to bring up an actual separate browser window where you can vote and submit ideas and things like that. As well, you can request a feature that'll do the same thing. The Facebook group will also bring up the Facebook group for Plottr. It's a fairly active group. It hasn't been as active of late, but generally there's people in there that can give you answers to your questions, whether that's your peers or the staff from Plottr will come and answer questions for you. And there's documentation, demos, tutorials, frequently asked questions. So there is some documentation if you get confused in Plottr, because we're going to give this a really quick demo today, which is a really quick overview of everything that the software can do. So if you want more in-depth information, we'll be releasing some tutorials here at Plot Geek Academy, and there's also some that are available from Plottr. Okay, now once you open a file, generally it will start by looking like this. It will have Chapter 1 across the top, which is going to be the chapters of your story. And then it'll have these coming down the left-hand side. These are known as plot lines, okay? You can add as many of these as you'd like. So you can add a subplot. You can add a timeline. There are all kinds of these that I normally add to my fiction, and I'll show you those in a little bit when we get to a more robust platform. You can also add as many chapters as you like. So you can add a whole bunch of chapters out here. And that gives you all kinds of room on this timeline. Then at the intersection of that, of the chapter or this heading, whatever you want that to be, then you have what's called a scene card. Okay, and I'm going to show you this in a minute as well. But some of you are going to say, well, I don't write in chapters. Maybe I write in beats, or I write in scenes because that's the way I like to structure my story. You can change that by coming here to structure, and you can change this. Now, I generally write in beats, so I'm going to change this to beat. Okay, and you'll notice that across the top, everything changed to beat 1. You can also change the appearance of those things. There's also a structure feature, but we're going to look at that in a little bit because that's a little more advanced feature of Plottr, and we don't want to go too in-depth with that. We'll actually probably look at that in an additional video. Okay, so this is your scene card. Now, within this scene card, you can do all kinds of cool things. Okay, one thing you can do is you can move this plot line from the main plot. Like I can move this scene card to the subplot by just clicking on this drop-down menu here. And if I pop out and look, now this is moved to the subplot. Now, you can also move these around by dragging and dropping them. You can tag characters. I'm going to show you that in just a minute as well. You can tag places. You can create tags of your own, and you can change the color of these scene cards. And here you have some rich text features, and you can create a description of what's going to happen in this scene. Now, we're going to talk about attributes and templates in just a minute when we go over and look at a completed project, because rather than having you sit here and watch me create a new book here and type all these things in, instead, we're going to pop over to the Project tab, and we're going to look at that I have developed these plot analysis of all of the Die Hard movies. Why? Well, because I like the movie Die Hard. It's a pretty simple plot, especially the first one. Don't talk to me about Die Hard 2, and then A Good Day to Die Hard is a little, well, anyway, that's another story. Okay, we can talk about that another time. But I've outlined all of these and arranged all of these stories within Plottr so that you can see some of the things that Plottr does and have happened using a story that you're probably familiar with. And if you're not, hey, stop the video, go watch Die Hard, because you really should know what it's all about. Anyway, so we're going to click inside that. We're going to look at what we've done here. So what I've done, instead of a plot and a subplot, is I've added John McClane and then Holly Gennaro McClane, who was his ex-wife. Okay, or not ex-wife yet. You know, they were separated. Anyway, he goes out to LA to see her, if you know the story. It's a Christmas party. A bunch of terrorists supposedly take over this tower and the party, but it turns out they're not terrorists. They're really just thieves. Anyway, so that's the story of Die Hard, and we'll explore all that in just a minute. But basically, across the top, I have beats instead of chapters, right? Because I like to work in beats. And down the side, I have John McClane and Holly Gennaro as my two different plot lines. So I'm following these two different characters throughout the story. Okay, now within each of these, I've got a description of what's happening in this scene. So the title is Go Out to L.A., and this is where Detective John McClane arrives in L.A. to find a limo driver, Argyle, waiting for him. The driver takes him to a party at Nakatomi Plaza, a high-rise building in Los Angeles, to attend a Christmas party thrown by the company his wife Holly now works for. She's been living and working in L.A. while he remained in New York. He hopes to heal their relationship by spending the holiday together. They also have children. The children don't play as big of a role in this story, but they do. And that comes out further throughout the series. But you'll notice that over here I have tagged characters. I've tagged John McClane, and I've tagged Argyle, who is the limo driver, okay? And I've tagged Nakatomi Plaza. And then I've added some themes, the theme of reconciliation. This is a reactive scene, and of the scenes in Die Hard, this is a relatively slow scene. And I'll show you how I come up with those tags here in just a few minutes. But there's some other things that I can do with these scenes as well. Now, the first one is that I can create attributes for each scene card. Okay, now I can configure these attributes over here. Okay, so I can choose that I want goal, motivation, emotion, and conflict. And most of the time, you can actually reorder these, because most of the time, I would actually like my conflict to be up above the emotion. Okay, but you can add whichever one of these you want. You can delete these. Just be aware that if you have something entered in the attribute in any scene card, that if you delete it in this scene card, it will delete them in every single scene card. That is because attributes are global. Attributes apply to every single scene card that you have in your project. So every one that you open up will have blanks for these same attributes, and you can fill those out. Now, goal, motivation, and conflict. So I describe John McClane's goal. His motivation in the scene is to heal their broken relationship. The conflict is he stayed behind in New York City. She moved to L.A., and neither one of them wants to give and join the other one. But the emotion at the end of this scene is hope. That's what I want the reader to feel. The reader feels hope that, hey, maybe this will be the thing, and maybe they'll get back together, right? Okay? So attributes are global. They apply to every single scene card that you create. So when we go and look at other scene cards, you'll see that these same attributes are present. You don't have to fill out all of them, but this gives you a place to fill out all of them. Okay? Now, the other thing you can do is add templates. So there are scene templates contained within Plottr, and some of them can be very useful. This one, for instance, is a reactive scene. In this particular part of the story, John McClane is reacting to the things that are happening to him. He hasn't yet become proactive. That happens later in the book, and often for many books that happens after the midpoint. Not always, but sometimes it does, okay? So this is a reactive scene. So we could describe the things that John McClane would be feeling in this particular scene because he's reacting to what's happening to him. And again, this is a relatively slow scene. But we can add other templates as well. We can add as many as we want. So these ones you'll see are my templates. And then you'll see that there are starter templates down below, and there's several of them. Goal, motivation, and conflict, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, a plot problem evaluation that goes with the Story Genius story method, Sarin canons, and we have scene essentials, where basically it's the point of view, the time period, the hook, the purpose, the conflict. All of these things are shown in these scene essentials, and you can fill all of these out. So it depends on how much information you want to know about each of these scenes. but templates can be added individually or in combination to scenes. Okay, so templates are individual per scene, attributes are global. Okay, so if I go over to Have a Few Laughs, where John McClane reunites with his wife, who's been working under a maiden name, meets her coworker Ellis, a coke-using egotistical jerk, and her boss, who's also a rich jerk. Lots of jerks here. As McClane cleans up for a party, a group of terrorists, led by Hans Gruber, overtakes the building and takes the partygoers hostage, including his wife. Right? Now, when we look at this, we've tagged characters that are in this scene: Hans and John McClane, Nakatomi Plaza. Now, we have the theme of power and control. There's very much a power of control by Hans Gruber, who's the bad guy. It's reactive still on the part of John McClane. And surprisingly, this is a medium action scene. This is not the highest action scene of the book by any means. And again, we can change the color of these scene cards, and I'll show you why I do that and when I do that in just a minute. But if we look at the attributes are the same: goal, motivation, conflict, and emotion. Okay, this again is a reactive scene, so we've added this template so that we'll fill this out so we'll understand how John McClane is reacting to the events around him. Okay, now at the same time, we've got Holly Gennaro, and so this is the stuff that's from her point of view. We hop back and forth in points of view, not completely, primarily. This is John McClane's story. He's what we would call as the primary actor if we were doing more of a deeper type of story analysis. But then we do see some things from Holly Gennaro's point of view. And so this plot line tells her point of view. Now, the way I use color in these scenes myself is I use this to indicate the stage of editing. So if I am in the process of writing this, I use blue. If I'm in the process of editing, I use yellow. And when I'm done editing, I change it to green. And you'll notice that then it's green on the timeline, and that tells me that I have completed the editing process of this scene. Now, I don't use that as much anymore since I'm using some other software for editing, and we'll talk about that a little bit later in this video and a little further on. But you can use Plottr all throughout your writing process and use it to indicate the stages of editing. Then when every scene on your timeline is green, that would mean your thing is done and ready to send to the editor. Okay, but let's talk about the outline really quick. Or actually, let's talk about these different things up here really quick first. So attributes, this is another place where you can configure the attributes besides inside the scene card. You can flip the view of your Plottr file. I do not like this at all, so I never do it, but it is possible you can do it. There's also the large, medium, and small. Okay, so you can see your project at different levels. In this particular case, I've only got 12 beats in Die Hard, and I'm going to show you why that is in a few minutes. But so I don't need it zoomed all the way out, but zooming out this far can be useful. I just normally operate here where I can see everything as large as possible, and then I scroll back and forth. And speaking of scrolling back and forth, this is your directional arrows. You can scroll back and forth. This one takes you all the way to the end, all the way to the beginning, the midpoint. Now, if you click on this mid part and the middle of your story is not in the center of your screen, you might have a pacing problem. That's just a little Troy hint to go along with that. We'll talk about search here in a little bit, and we'll talk a little more about these two buttons over here in a little while. Okay, because now we're going to look at the outline. So the outline is basically the timeline, but it's flipped into kind of a linear, almost like an English class outline point of view. I do not use the outline format very much at all. I don't use this tab very much at all, but I occasionally use it to filter by plot line. And the reason I do that is, let's say I have a main plot and a subplot. Well, if I look at the main plot, I want to make sure that this stands alone, even if the subplot did not exist. Okay, so the subplot enhances the story. It doesn't rule the story. And if I don't have the subplot, it doesn't ruin the story. Right? The subplot just enhances it. Or in some cases, if I have more than one plot going in the same book, then I can look at each of those and make sure that each one is complete and that I've resolved all the things in there, especially in the revision process. But I don't use this much at all. Okay. Now I do use the notes section. This is where I house a lot of research. You can see that I can tag this by books in the notes, and I can tag it by characters. So obviously, there's several books, several stories in the Die Hard series. There's only one of them, the first Die Hard movie, where the ingredients of a Twinkie actually play kind of a role. Okay, so I have the ingredients of the Twinkie here. That's associated with the character Al Powell. If you don't know what that means, well, hey, again, go watch Die Hard. You can create attributes for notes as well. Generally, the attribute I create is called source. Okay, the reason I create an attribute called source is so that I can link to whatever source it is that I found this research or this note. So I can then click on that link, go back out to the internet, and see what my source was without getting distracted and going and Googling the same thing again. Okay? So that's what I do. Anyway, and then I have some categories here. You can create categories for your notes as well. Pre-writing research, weapons, settings, etc. So setting notes where, blueprints of a large skyscraper, and then I have weapons. Can a machine gun break a window? How many bullets does an AK-47 rifle hold? And more information about the Glock G7 because that plays a role in Die Hard 2 if you've seen that as well. Okay, so if I look at that one, you notice that that one is tagged with Die Hard 2 and tagged with a character that has and uses that weapon. Okay, so that's why I've tagged that weapon that way. Okay, but I can have all kinds of things about the weapons. I can say, can a machine gun break a window? And that's really related to Die Hard, and it's really related to John McClane. So I can choose John McClane from all of these characters here. And leave that at that. Now, if I had additional tags I wanted to add to the notes, I can add those as well. Okay, you can sort these alphabetically. Again, I don't ever do that either. You can actually filter them by the book's characters or things they're in. So if I only want to look at the stuff from Die Hard because I'm working on it and not the other book, then I can basically filter out the rest of the notes and not have to look at them. Okay, so that can be very helpful as well. Okay, now we're going to look at characters. So we're going to look at characters. I'm going to show you a cool feature that Plottr has. Now, this is a cool feature. It can be confusing and problematic, so you are the one that has to organize this and use this because you have to do it correctly. Okay, this gives you all the characters in the series over here. Okay, then they're by book here, so I can look at only the characters that are tagged with Die Hard the movie. Okay. Now, and then you can see which movies these guys appear in. Al Powell is in Die Hard and Die Hard 2. Okay? Argyle is just in Die Hard. You know, Holly Gennaro is in a bunch of them. Okay? Hans Gruber is only in one because, hey, he dies. Same with Ellis. Okay? He's only in Die Hard because he dies. Okay? So we can look at characters by book, or in this case by movie, or we can look at the whole series worth of characters. Now, within the characters, you can have a short description and a long description. So this could be, you know, ex-cop from New York City, right? Could be our short description. Then we have notes about John McClane. We have attributes. We're going to talk about his goal, motivation, and conflicts, so we can talk about that. We could talk about his Enneagram type. So there's all kinds of character templates that you could add as well. These are ones that I've created myself. And then there are these starter templates down below, and there are over 20 of these, and you can explore those kind of on your own. But things like Big 5 personality traits, Clifton Strengths profile, all that kind of stuff, those things you can use to look at that. If you ever don't understand one of those, there's a little information button up here that will take you out to the internet and give you some more information on those personality types or whatever. Now, if you ever don't want a template here anymore, you can just come over and remove it. Okay, so you can do all that with characters. You can add an image here. Often I've seen people as well in the notes section that'll link to the characters if they're using as a movie star or whatever as their pattern for their character, then they will have a link to their IMDb profile or something like that here, where they can click on that, look at images of the character, and then describe that to their reader. Okay, so that can be useful as well. So that's the characters section. The places section, again, is fairly simple. You can also sort it by book. Okay, so what's cool about this one is when we sort it by Die Hard, there's really only one setting. Now, there's a few settings within Nakatomi Plaza, but everything happens in the same place, which is why this book is a great example, because there's only one setting. So it's very, very simple. It gets blown up and damaged in many ways. Now, a lot of times if I'm using, because I write mysteries and thrillers, I often place I often base the places that I use in my fiction on a real place. So I will put a Google Maps link here, but not to just the place, but to the Google Maps Street View. So I can click on that, describe it to my reader, and click right back into my writing. Now, I've started to use some additional tools besides this, and we'll look at those later as well. So I've started to use some tools in addition to this. We'll look at those later as well, but these are things that you can do within Plottr. Now, within Plottr also, you can create tags. So you can create editor marks. You can create a theme, a scene type, pacing, characters. Now, usually I don't use characters because I've got other means of tagging characters, but people do. I've seen people with pages and pages of these tags of all different types. You can change the color of them. You can also add categories as well. Okay, so you can add your own categories. Tags in general for me are anything that adds an extra layer of organization to your story that are not related to notes, characters, and places, because those are all things that I can tag by in the timeline. Okay, so how does that work? Well, when I get over here to the timeline, I can filter, but I can filter by those tags or by the places. So I can filter by Nakatomi Plaza. Well, everywhere in here is going to show up at Nakatomi Plaza. I can filter by the scenes that Argyle appears in, and notice that he's just in this one and then he reappears towards the end of the book. Okay, but that character is not throughout the book as much as the other characters are. Okay, so, and that warns you that your timeline's filtered. So you can filter by anything. So you could filter by fast scenes, and you could say, hey, if there's too many fast scenes in a row, maybe I'm exhausting my reader. I need to vary the pace a little bit. If there's too many medium, I'm probably boring my reader, or slow ones especially, I'm boring my reader. I need to have that roller coaster where I'm mixing up my pacing. Okay, so that's one way to see whether you're doing that correctly or not. Okay, now, so there's that. Now, we're going to talk a little bit. So, let's talk about search really quick. So let's say we did Argyle here, and we search for that word. Okay, what's going to happen is everything else disappears except for what Argyle is in. Okay, but if he were mentioned in another scene, but he weren't tagged, that would still show up. Okay, so you can do that. Then this search up here at the top right actually has a search and replace. So you can search for Hans, and you can see all the different places that Hans is in this list, or you can replace. You can search and replace. Okay, so just be careful with that, kind of like Microsoft Word. If you have something that's close, if you search for MER and you replace that because you're trying to replace something, you could replace every MER and make a real mess out of your project and have to either go back and redo that or something along that line. Okay, so don't do that. Be careful with search and replace. Okay, structure, you can add act structure. We're not going to go in super deep into this other than to say that you can add chapters and acts to your story. So you can add up to 3 levels. You can call these things whatever you want. You can rearrange them. I'm not going to go into that here except to offer you one word of caution, and that is this. If I go up here and delete this chapter, it will delete all of the scene cards that are underneath it. Okay, so if you have anything under chapter 1, it'll delete all of them. That's not what you want to do. If you deleted Act 1, it would delete everything in your timeline, and getting it back can be kind of a pain because even though the undo works, it's a little bit tricky. Okay, so don't do that. If you want to remove levels of structure, come in here and remove them. Okay, and that will remove the structure. Okay, so don't remove that by hitting delete when you're over on this section here. It'll delete everything underneath of that. Same as if I deleted beat 5, it would delete these 2 scene cards. Okay, so don't do it that way. Be sure you manage it under structure. Okay, now let's look at the project again, because this is where you can house all the different books. My biggest series has 25 in it right now, with more being added. So you can have as many books here as you would like. It does get a little difficult to organize the notes and places when you get to that many books. You have to be sure that you're filtering on a regular basis because it can be challenging to manage all of those different places. So just to make you aware of that when you're using Plottr for that. You can also do a series view of Die Hard, and you could come here and have all of the different plot lines in this particular viewpoint, and so you could compare the plot lines of the different books, all that kind of stuff, or you can use this to map out the plot line of your overall series if you wanted to do something like that. So that's another viewpoint. Okay, now going back to the project again, you can add another book here, but you can also, and this is where we're going to talk about plot templates. You can start with plot templates. These are mine. I have a whole bunch of them that I have created, and there are a bunch of starter templates over here. Somewhere around 30 of them. There are all kinds of different ones for all kinds of different genres. You can filter them by that. You can check out those templates, and I'm going to show you how we use those in just a second. But this is one way that you can do that. Now, I never start a book or a project with a template. So I would never use this button or this button here and create from a template unless I was doing a demo of one of these templates. Okay, I would not do that. That's not the way I would do it. I'm going to show you the way I would do it. The way I do it is I come down here to Plottr, to my timeline, and I say, and I'm going to skip ahead here a little bit and tell you that I use the Victor Pinheiro screenplay method because that works really well for Die Hard. Okay, so I come down here and I use the Pinheiro screenplay method. If you're not familiar with this, this is one of the most underrated plot structures that there is around, especially if you're writing thrillers, and it's really great. So I'm going to choose that. Okay, now the reason I choose that at this point, usually at the revision point, or maybe at the planning stage, just to check my work, is I want to check my pacing. I want to make sure that everything is running the way it should be. Now, I'll tell you some other things about these templates. I never add my details above this line, ever, ever, ever. And the reason is, I want the stuff from my story to be out here in case I change my mind about which template I'm going to use or I add a different one. Okay, this tells you some things about what should be in Act 1. It has a breakdown here of the overall story. I will tell you that this right here, I pretty much ignored those as well, except in the revision process, because then authors tend to do too much math and they become too concerned with the math of their story and not the art of letting it happen. Okay, so I generally pay no attention to those till the revision process. Okay, and you can see that there's 12 beats in Die Hard. We come out here, there's 12 beats in the Victor Pinheiro screenplay method. And if we went through and followed all those along, you'd see that these pretty much match up. That the spark here matches up with have a few laughs. That do I stay or do I go matches up with now I have a gun. Okay, it doesn't match exactly. The other thing I want to remind you about any plot structure and any plot template is that it's a guide. You can skip things, change things, rearrange the order of things as long as you have the essential pacing and the main parts of a story in place. You don't have to tag every single thing just because you use a certain plot structure. So in fact, please don't do that. Okay, don't use your story comes first. Structure comes second. Okay, well, the other thing is that we don't write in Plottr. You could technically write in the scene cards. I would never do it. It would be the export and stuff like that would be really awkward. So you export this generally to a writing software. Now, there's a few you can use. You can use Microsoft Word. You can use Scrivener. I don't ever hit either of these buttons either because I'm a control freak and I'm an author, so I hit Advanced. So then I choose exactly when I want to export and what I want that to look like. I don't export notes, characters, or places ever. In this particular case of Scrivener, because I don't want these to appear in my Scrivener. The only thing I use Scrivener for in writing is writing, except that I've switched to a different writing software. And I'll tell you about that in just a second. Okay, so if I'm going to export to Word, I'm going to export the same way. I'm just going to export the outline. And the reason is because the other software I'm using, I can import a Word document. Okay, so what I'm probably not going to do is I'm not going to export any templates. And I'm only going to export the templates, the plot lines that have information about the characters that I'm writing about. Okay, because these are the only things that I want to come into my other software. I don't want any of this other information. I'm going to create that in a different way. Okay, so I'm going to use that differently. So the writing software I've been using is called Readsy Studio. It's free. It's kind of like Google Docs. It's online only though, so there is that disadvantage, but it's free. You can collaborate with other people. You can do track changes similar to what you do in Word. It's like Google Docs, only way better. And without the baggage that comes with Google Docs, of course. So that's the software I've been using. You can also do some kind of your planning in there as well. Once you've set up your main planning in Plottr, you can move some of that over to Readsy Studio. And if you want to see that, we have a demo of Readsy Studio on our YouTube channel. We'll include a link to that below this video, and you can go over and check that out as well and see what we're writing in. Okay, well that's it for today's demo of Plottr. That's a really basic overview of how this software works. Some things about it that don't work as well as we would like, so we don't use those particular things. And we'll be adding some more education about Plottr going forward, about the different ways that we use it, some of the tips and tricks to making it work a little bit better for you. But with that, that's it for this time. We'll see you in the next video, and have a wonderful day.